Your steadfast love, who can escape? Your faithfulness and endlessly, so full of grace and mercy. And we sing, God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. Yes, He is so good. Oh, I'm haunted by the past no more, 'cause my innocence has been restored. Forgiveness flows from your veins. Your kindness shown in all your ways. And we sing, God is so good. God is so good. Yeah, God is so good. He's so good to me. There's never been anyone like you. Never been anyone like you. You are worthy. You are worthy. Oh, there's never been anyone like you. Never been anyone like you. You are worthy. You are worthy. I see that hope is rising like the sun. Yeah. The old is gone, the new has come. I fix my eyes on Christ alone. He's my rock, my shield, my cornerstone. And we sing, God is so good. God is so good. Yes, He is. God is so good. He's so good to me. Yeah. I know God, He's so good. You're still good to me. Yeah. I know that God, you're still good. You're so good to me.
Okay, everybody, let's talk curiosity and spirituality and see if we can make room for the two together and how they go together. Because there's actually those that think that spirituality and curiosity should not go together. Why? Because if you stay too curious, it will lead you away from an authentic spirituality or an orthodox Christian spirituality. I can't even count how many Christian ministry websites I went to this week in researching this that said, be careful, curiosity is dangerous, don't go near it, just follow, just be obedient. The answers are all there. So I am in this series called If Faith Had a Brain. And what I'm looking at is this whole idea that deep Christian spirituality should always include our mind. It should always include the expanding of our mind. It should always include the opening and the evolving of our mind and our intelligence equal to our heart. Curiosity should lead our spirituality in a way that not only does our mind evolve, but when we look at culture, when we look at the natural world around us, when we are curious about it, and we expand and evolve to understand it deeper, curiosity should work in a way that it may actually affect and change staid beliefs that we've held, beliefs that we've actually been uncurious about, that we've just adopted. I think Christian spirituality, when faith has a brain, it should impact that. Now, perhaps you were inculcated or developed around a certain kind of Christian faith or spirituality that never encouraged the virtue of curiosity. Again, perhaps you were told it's going to wander, have you wander away, or somebody felt it was a threat to what you were supposed to believe. And so I want to talk about that. And here's the good news about curiosity. More and more is being researched about it, and more is being studied about it. You can read plenty about being curious and staying curious from a psychological perspective, and even from a self-help perspective. And I think it's wonderful. But when you get to the theological world, when you get to the Christian church world, not a lot is being talked about being curious. In fact, as I told you, I read plenty of things this week that said when it comes to your Christian spirituality, beware of being too curious. And I don't think that reflects the heart of God at all. In our Christian spirituality, we weren't necessarily encouraged to be curious. We were encouraged to gain more knowledge, right? You know this much, so ask questions that gain you more knowledge in this much. You have more questions, ask them so we can give you the answers. And when you think about curiosity, what actually fuels curiosity? What throws sparks on the fire, right? It's always question asking. Curiosity is fueled by wondering about more, wondering what else, and asking questions about it. That's what curiosity does. And when you are truly curious, you are willing to be open, you are willing to evolve. The truly curious person shows up with an unbiased mind, unbiased judgment, willing to allow their curiosity to take them where it takes them. Now, when you think of theology and when you think of the kind of Christian spirituality that is so prevalent around us, it's fueled by the exact opposite. If curiosity is fueled by questions, the current Christian theology that is so prevalent around us, that is fueled by the answers. That is fueled by the right doctrine. That is fueled by the right defense. In fact, what encourages all of this is there's even a verse that is used from 1 Peter 3:15 that is so encourages answers, not more questions, answers. And I want to show you this verse, but I also then want you to consider something new about it. So here is the verse that often encourages, let's give them more answers. Look at this. Be ready at all times to give an answer to anyone who asks you to explain the hope you have in you. So what does this mean? Well, here the writer says, be ready to give an answer. Now that word answer, it's true that the Greek word answer is the word apologia. It's where we get the word apologetics from, like Plato's Apology or Christian apologetics. And what the word apologia means, the English word answer, apologia means to give an answer, to give a defense. But what has happened with this verse, in that word apologia, this verse has been so proof text to give an explanation to anybody that has any theological question, to give them a theological staid answer on salvation, on soteriology, on eschatology, on atonement, on discipleship, and on biblical literalism, and on and on and on. And what's interesting, when you look at the context of this verse, my opinion, that's not what it means at all. This verse, 1 Peter 15, was written very late in the first century, maybe in the early second century. It was written about what's going on in Rome. And in Rome, Italy at that time, many Christian believers were under horrible persecution, horrible torture. And the writer of 1 Peter is encouraging them to stay loving, to stay strong, and to stay resilient. And so he's encouraging them, hey, when people come up to you and go, why are you still so strong, so resilient, so loving when you're being so persecuted? He says, be ready to give them an apologia. Be ready to give them an answer as to why you're so loving and resilient and strong. It's because of the hope you have that comes from your relationship with God, with Christ. Be ready to give them that answer. That's what that verse means. It's not this catch-all verse that gets proof text that you need to be ready to give answers for why you believe. That is not what this verse means. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I was a weird kid when it came to spiritual things. As a young boy, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, that whole era, I was so interested in theology. I was so interested in spiritual things. I was so interested in Christianity. And being Italian and Spanish, of course, the first part of my life, I was raised Catholic in New York. And so I would go to catechism every single week for religious training, Catholic instruction. And I remember I started reading my Bible on my own. I was so curious, and I just started reading the New Testament, specifically the Gospels, on my own. And there was a Catholic doctrine, I guess there still is, called purgatory. And so what purgatory is, you're not so good that you can go to heaven. You're not so bad that you're damned to hell. You go to purgatory, which is this kind of way station in between, that maybe you could work or get more spiritual so you can earn your way to heaven. Now, the concept of purgatory is specific to Catholic theology. It's not found in the scriptures. And so I was reading this, and I remember I was so curious that in catechism I would wave my hand. They were teaching on something else, but I would wave my hand and I would ask about that. Hey, I'm reading my Bible. I don't see purgatory. Explain this to me. And I remember the nun being so frustrated that she goes, what? And she passes me on. Well, each week I show up with my Bible and I keep asking the same question to her annoyance. She finally treats my Bible like it's a pack of gum. She goes, David, would you bring that Bible here? She takes my Bible, she opens up the top drawer of her desk and sticks it in, and she goes, you will not get this Bible back until you behave and stop asking these questions. And I remember even then thinking, wow, that even for my little, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old mind and heart, I remember thinking, wow, that just doesn't make sense. It seems like God and spirituality would certainly be able to handle my curious questions. So what about curiosity? What about Christian theology? I'll let the psychologists, I'll let the neuroscientists, I'll let the philosophers, the poets, the writers, the artists, even the business gurus, I'll let them talk about being curious and staying curious in their areas, and you should listen to them. I love all that's happening with curiosity from all these sectors of interest and all these different kind of communities. But what I can speak about is my area, which is theological and spiritual curiosity. Well, David, could someone be so spiritually and theologically curious that they get involved in a cult, or they start a cult, or could they be so curious that it takes them down the road of hyper supernatural, magical Christianity? Could they be so curious that it just takes them away from something like that? And here's what I guess the honest answer is: sure, it could. But listen, healthy curiosity, mature curiosity, is always centered in freedom, and it's always centered in your mind and heart. Cults are about control. Religious fundamentalism, religious literalism, religious doctrinal rigidity, that is maintained by authority and control. And I don't think, my experience, that's not what healthy curiosity is. So healthy curiosity never leads us to places of control or authoritarianism or rigidity, doctrinal rigidity that can't budge or change. That's my opinion. So I'm talking about healthy curiosity that expands and opens up our minds and our hearts in very healthy, mature, loving, sense-making ways. So as a minister, again, I'll speak about spiritual and theological Christianity because I want you to have it. I want you to cultivate it. SPERO DEI, we are a church that it's partly built on theological curiosity. We have 5 values at SPERO DEI, and our second value is that we think Christian theology evolves. We think it should evolve, and it's for the curious who are going to ask questions that maybe the kind of Christianity that you've been part of is no longer asking, or certainly not wanting anyone asking. So I'm here to encourage your theological and your spiritual healthy curiosity. And when it's guided by wisdom, empathy, and love and maturity, it stays away from indoctrination. It stays away from control and authoritarianism. So I want to show you a story from the Gospel of John where you see one person curious, and then you see a group of people not so curious. What's amazing is Jesus in his life and in the Jesus narrative, he's often colliding with and running into and encountering blind people. Blindness is a good metaphor for curiosity. When we are blind about something, when we cannot see something, we can remain curious about it. So this is a story about Jesus encountering a blind person while there's a bunch of other people who can see. Let me read this to you. In fact, no, let me say this. Jesus earlier in John 9 heals this blind guy. Then the religious leaders kind of interrogate the blind guy. And then the part of the story I'm going to show you is when Jesus comes back around and follows up with this blind guy. This is the follow-up. Let's read along. When Jesus had heard what had happened, and that was about the religious leaders pulling this guy aside and interrogating him about why he was blind and now he can see, that's what that's about. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the blind man and asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "Who is he, sir? I want to trust in him." "You have seen him," Jesus said, "and he is speaking to you." "Yes, Lord, I trust," the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, "I entered this world to give sight to the blind and to show those who think they see that they are blind." Some religious leaders who were standing nearby heard him and asked, "Are you saying we're blind?" "If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty," Jesus replied. "But you remain guilty because you claim you can see." And folks, as a former biblical literalist, as a former Christian evangelical, verses 40 and 41 are perfect for me. There was a time that I would have said, I'm not blind at all. I finally have found the truth. I'm finally one of the ones who sees the truth, and I now have to share it with the world. And this part of the verse where Jesus says, it's almost like, David, you remain guilty, you remain clueless because you claim you could see. And there was all this time that in my rigidity and my doctrinal authority, I was sure I could see the truth. But I was blind to love and inclusion and the expanse of the mind and heart that has open arms for the world. I just saw the world as saved and lost, right and wrong, in and out. And so I love what Paul says in Ephesians 4. You must be made new in your hearts and in your thinking. Be that new person who was made to be like God. So what Paul is saying, when we are like God, not we are God, but when we have God likeness in us, it includes our hearts, it includes our minds. Curiosity includes both of those things. Paul also said in Philippians, "Let this mind be in you." What mind? Which was also in Christ Jesus. You know, Richard Rohr has been so influential in my own spirituality about opening up and seeing things anew and seeing things afresh while still holding on to the Christianity that's meaningful to me. And I love what Rohr said here. He says, most people do not see things as they are because they see things as they are. We tend to see things thinking we're seeing what's actually true, when the way we see things is through the lenses that are who we are. We just show up, as I said several weeks ago, with our own biases, our own perspectives, our own indoctrination going, that's how things are, but it's actually who we are. But I also want to talk about being curious about our own lives. And when we are curious about our own pain, when we're curious about our own sadness, when we're curious about our own hurts, when we're curious about the pain, the hurts, and the people around us, oh my gosh, this just opens us up to seeing things without lenses. It allows us to start seeing things as they are. And so I just want to encourage you to pause and to be curious about your own backstory, to be curious about your own pain, your own lack of fulfillment. And here's the deal: when you're less curious about the people around you, when people disagree with you, or people are different than you, when you show up believing that you see things as they are, then you show up more reactionary. Well, I disagree with that. Well, I think you're wrong. Or you show up very persuasive. This is the right way. Or you have to influence others. But when you show up very curious about someone who thinks differently, who sees things differently, who feels things that you don't feel, when you were like, tell me more about that, or I'm curious, fill me in about that, you become less reactive to people with your own agendas, and you just become more empathetic, and you grow more open and wise to feeling what they feel and seeing things as they see them. I believe this is an important part of curiosity, and I think it very much reflects deep Christian spirituality. Remember, I said earlier that the blind, blindness can be a metaphor for our own question asking. Here's another story in Luke 18 about a blind guy who finds Jesus. Look at this. As Jesus was coming near Jericho, there was a blind man sitting by the road begging. When he heard the crowd passing by, he asked, "What is this?" Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, they told him, and he cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The people in front scolded him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." It seems like blind people in the scriptures invariably cry out for compassion for Jesus. Blindness is their vulnerability, and their blindness makes them so curious to seek more. And in a sense, in our blindness, metaphorically, this is from our own vulnerable state. When we feel vulnerable in this life, we're insecure, we're uncertain, we're in a cloud about something. The recovery movement calls this powerlessness. When we're feeling powerless, that's a form of blindness. I'll tell you what. When we're in that state, yet we remain very curious in it, we can cry out to life, to ourselves, to God, that often awaken us to the reality around us. We can now suddenly see things as they really are. And so many times for me, my worst enemy, it's me. It's when I blind myself off and well, I am blind, but still insist that I can see. And this is what Jesus is confronting. Richard Rohr talks about dualism, and that so often we can look at life dualistically. It's either this or that. It's either right or wrong. It's either Christian or non-Christian, biblical or unbiblical, right? It's constantly this comparing of one thing to another. And when we're comparing one thing to another, we insist we know about both things. And dualism has a way, when you look at life of who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, who believes, who doesn't, what's the right group, what's the wrong group, all of this dualistic viewpoint completely and utterly shuts down all kinds of curiosity, theological, spiritual, life curiosity. And when we don't have that. And so dualistic thinking, okay, that works when we're just starting out. Dualistic thinking works when our lives are in early stages of development. It's what gives us boundaries. It's what helps sets direction. It's what helps guides us, of course. But as you mature in life, as you mature as a person, as you mature spiritually, eventually dualism doesn't work at all. It's just more interested in answers and fixed answers and reaching conclusions that alleviate any existential angst. And as I said, it just throws a wet blanket on curiosity, shuts it down. And folks, I have discovered that the more I maintain curiosity, the more I stay spiritually and theologically curious, dualism in my life just begins to fade away more and more. And both and thinking and more open and evolved thinking, these become benchmarks that, oh my gosh, I'm actually growing. I think Christian spirituality is actually taking. And you want to hear another great and key side effect to staying spiritually and theologically curious? It always leads you to greater peace. It always leads you to greater calm in your life. That's the irony of being curious. Actually, the irony of having more questions than answers. It ironically has led me to greater peace and calm. It leads to a greater contemplative way of seeing myself, seeing God, seeing others, seeing the world, seeing culture. And curiosity quiets my need to judge others. It quiets my need to conclude something. It allows me to stay open and not have to have everything certain and figured out. When I had the kind of spirituality that I have to have the right answers, I have to save the world with the right answers, oh my gosh, that was just so exhausting to maintain, to upkeep. And when you stay curious, when you stay open, you no longer have to divide everything into a field of right or wrong, in and out, up and down, totally wrong, totally right. You can just live in the calm and peace of it is what it is. And staying curious in my life has just brought more inner spiritual calm. And it has just brought greater clarity into my life. And this isn't a spiritual stance of passivity. It's not at all. It takes great intention to stay curious. So this is my encouragement for you to stay theologically and stay spiritually curious. It's not going to be curiosity that kills the cat. It won't. If you're that cat, it will give you 9 spiritual lives. If your curiosity stays mature, stays healthy, if your curiosity still runs away from authoritarianism, no, you don't want that control, doctrinal rigidity that just encourages fear and distrust. Don't go near that. But if you have a healthy kind of curiosity, oh my gosh, you're the cat that it will give 9 spiritual lives to. God, I pray for my friends. I pray that all of us would stay curious. I pray that this virtue of curiosity that we see so prevalent in our Christian history, as it has evolved it and changed it and carried it forward, as it has developed scientific things and medical things, as it has brought more humaneness to the world, may we stay curious with that kind of curiosity. And God, may we be spiritual people that are more interested in asking deep questions than always having to look for certain specific answers. Curiosity is not a threat to our spirituality. It is what fuels it to greater clarity, to greater meaning, to greater peace. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, folks, before we go, I just want to say thank you to those of you who are financially supporting SPERO DEI. And we are such a new church. We're such a unique church. We are this church that is rethinking, reimagining Christianity in new kinds of ways, new kind of evolving ways. And in the lake and ocean of popular Christianity, we're a rare thing, but more and more people are finding us, and more of you are being encouraged in your Christian spirituality. And so if you are financially supporting us, you are helping sustain us, you are helping grow us. We also need more of us to help this thing along, to help this thing maintain and grow. And so if you want to give at SPERO DEI, it's really easy. All you do is go to SPERODEI.com, and if you look in the upper right hand of your screen, it will say give, and you just tap on give, and it's real easy to give, and it's safe and secure, just like your Amazon account, and it's that quick. So if you want to give one time or even join us as a recurring giver, not only would that help us, we would deeply, deeply appreciate it. Peace, everybody. See you next week.